This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. All right. So let's start. We're going to talk about Parshas Miketz. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and happy Hanukkah to everyone. Okay. Now, the question that I want to deal with over here is the following. Okay, it's like a sort of basic question, and we'll see that there's some major approaches to deal with this. And if you haven't thought about it, it will probably be a very intriguing question. If you have thought about it, then hopefully we'll share some new insights into it. All right, the basic question is the following. Yosef, right, in this week's parsha, we read about Yosef. Last week he was sold. Now he's risen to be the king of Egypt. Right, he's or in this week's parsha, he rises to be the king of Egypt. There's a famine, right? He interprets Pharaoh's dreams that there's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. The brothers come down during the famine, right? And there's this whole sort of dramatic back and forth between them, right? Yosef accuses them of being spies, and they deny it. And he wants them to prove it by bringing their youngest brother, who's been yummin down, right? So this conversation just drags on, and then he wants to keep them in prison, and only one of the brothers is going to go, and then he ends up keeping only Shimon in prison, and the other brothers go back, right? And Yaakov doesn't even want to let them go, right? And then in next week's parsha, the whole thing comes to a head, and Yehuda gives this big speech, right? And he implores Yosef, what he's doing, and then Yosef reveals himself. So the basic question is the following. This went on, the whole process from the time he's sold until he reveals himself is 22 years. All right, so the question is, why in all of this time did Yosef not let his father know that he's alive, right? Why didn't he, send a letter, send something, right? He's the king of Egypt. He's been the king of Egypt for 9 years now. So why in all of this time does he not let his father know at least that he's alive so his father can stop worrying about him, right? This seems like a very, very cruel behavior on Yosef's part, that here he is, he's sort of living the life, you could almost say, right? He's the second most powerful man in Egypt. He has a tremendous power, tremendous influence, tremendous wealth, right? He has a lot of things going for him. And his father is at home just mourning, right? His father's a totally broken man for all those years. The Torah says that he was just mourning his son. And at no point does Yosef make any attempt to find his father, or to send him a letter. He didn't even have to find him. He knows where he lives, right? But even to just get in touch with him, even to go visit, to tell him that he's alive and he's doing well in Egypt. All right, so that's the question that we want to try to deal with right now. Okay, so let me, I'm going to go through hopefully 4 different answers to this question. All right, the first one that I want to start with is the Ramban. All right, in his commentary on the Torah, so he says the following. He says that the reason Yosef did not tell his father that he was alive is because Yosef understood that he had these dreams, right? A lot of Yosef's life was guided by his dreams, right? He has dreams, Pharaoh has dreams. There's a lot of dreams that go on in Yosef's life. So Yosef had 2 dreams where his father and his brothers were bowing to him. Okay, so he knew that those dreams needed to be fulfilled. And those dreams had not yet been fulfilled, because even though 10 of his brothers came and bowed to him, but it wasn't all the brothers and it wasn't the father. So he knew that the dreams had not yet been fulfilled. So everything Yosef is doing in this parsha, according to the Ramban, is intended to enable those dreams to be fulfilled, right? Yosef is like this master strategist over here, and everything he's doing that seems strange is in order to make sure that those dreams end up being fulfilled, because it's very important for the dreams to be fulfilled. Okay, so this idea of the Ramban is a major key to understanding a lot of the strange things that happen in this parsha. Okay, so I'll give you the 3 things that the Ramban says. Why did Yosef call his brothers spies, right? Again, it seems like he's just trying to harass them or bother them, right? Or punish them. So the Ramban says, no, he wasn't at all trying to punish them. He wasn't trying to cause them pain. But he knew that the only way to get Binyamin and eventually his father down was to come up with this whole crazy strategy of accusing them of being spies. So Yosef is this, he's this master strategist, right? He's like the puppet master playing everybody in the situation. And that's why he calls them spies, in order to get his brother and Binyamin down. Okay, that's why he didn't reveal himself to the brothers initially, right? They walk in and he recognizes them and they don't recognize him, right? Rashi quotes the famous explanation, because when he left, he didn't have a beard, and now he had a beard. The brothers were older, so they had beards already. So that's why they didn't recognize Yosef, because he looked different. He had a beard, right? He recognized them, though, because he knew what they looked like with the beard. So right, they don't recognize him. Why didn't he just tell them, I'm Yosef? So again, the answer is because he knew that he needed to engineer this situation somehow, that everyone would come and bow down to him in fulfillment of the dream. So that's why he didn't reveal who he was until after the dream was fulfilled. Okay, and the second, right, the last part of it is he, right, later on when they come the second time, so he does this whole crazy thing with the cup, right? His cup, he hides it in Binyamin's like knapsack, right? His bag, and then they leave with the cup, and then they discover it, right? And Yosef's guy comes and confronts them and discovers it and brings them back, right? It's this whole to do. So why is he so busy with the cup? So the Ramban says the truth is that Yosef was actually worried for Binyamin, because he didn't know. Maybe Binyamin is also the father's favorite, right? Maybe Binyamin is Yaakov's new favorite, and they're going to try to kill Binyamin now, right? Or maybe Binyamin is going to uncover the plot, right? Binyamin had no idea that they had tried to kill and then sold Yosef. So maybe Binyamin is going to uncover the plot of what they did on the way back, and they're going to kill him to cover it up. So in order to protect Binyamin, Yosef didn't want to let him leave. So that's why he put the cup in there, and then he had them come back, right? He went through this whole thing in order to make sure that he protected Binyamin. Okay, so according to the Ramban, the key theme over here is that Yosef is the puppet master of the whole story, right? Yosef's leadership skills are really coming to the fore throughout this story, because he's not only the dreamer that had this dream that they're going to bow to him. He's not only the viceroy of Egypt, but he's also he's strategically manipulating the whole situation. He's actively making sure that the dreams come to fruition in order to fulfill the dreams. All right, so that is going to answer our initial question: why didn't Yosef send for his father? Because that would have messed up the whole dreams, right? In other words, then there wouldn't have been this whole situation where they had to come down to Egypt and they bowed to him, right? There wouldn't have been this whole situation because his father would have known exactly who he was. So that's why, at great personal sacrifice, Yosef stopped himself for all those years from contacting his father in order to be able to fulfill the dreams. Okay, so that is approach number one. That is the Ramban's approach. Now, before I go on to the other approaches, I want to just go through some of the problems here. And I guess I'll introduce this guy. I was going to introduce him later, but I'll introduce him now. There's a contemporary guy in Israel named Yoel Binon, who ended up, he became sort of famous the last few years for being on the liberal end of things. So he's been doing a lot of the women's ordination stuff. But before that, he was better known as a Bible scholar. He had a very interesting idea. All right, and it's very impressive for a guy, I don't know, this was maybe in the 80s or 90s, but it's impressive for a guy 30, 40 years ago to be able to come up with a very, very fresh idea in these stories, because these stories have been studied for, I don't know, thousands of years. We have so many great commentaries on them. To come up with something really original is just very impressive. So before I get to his idea, though, okay, I want to, he has some very good questions on the Ramban. Okay, these are very good questions. First, he quotes from the Akedas Yitzchak that the Ramban is saying that Yosef didn't contact his father in order to fulfill the dreams. Says the Akedas Yitzchak, you know what? It's not Yosef's problem to make sure that the dreams are fulfilled. It's God's problem. God gave him the dream. It's right. A dream is like a prophecy. So it's God's business to make sure that the dreams are fulfilled. Right. If I have a dream, right, suppose I have a dream and in the dream it says that I'm gonna get $1 million. Right. I can't go start stealing from everybody I know, right? Holding people up at gunpoint to get the $1 million. Right. It's like there's rules to the world, right? You can't steal. So if God wants me to have $1 million, okay, let him deal with it. Right. It's the same thing here. If God wants them to all bow to Yosef, he can't start violating kibud av, right? He's totally ignoring his father's needs. He can't just ignore his father's needs and the mitzvah of honoring his father, the mitzvah of being a good person because he wants to fulfill the dream, right? Whatever it is, if it's supposed to happen, then it will happen, right? If you believe in the dream strongly enough, then it will happen, however it happens. But it's not your, right? The Ramban is saying something that seems like twisted values, as if Yosef is allowed to ignore his father's pain in order to make sure the dream happens. When in fact, just because you had a dream doesn't exempt you from basic rules. All right, so that's question number one. Why did Yosef again ignore his father just because he had this dream, right? If the dream is supposed to happen, it will, and God can take care of it. Problem number two is that Rashi says that they had actually already fulfilled the dreams the first time they came down. Even though Yaakov and Binyamin were not there, it was only the brothers that bowed, but that was a fulfillment of the dream. Now, the Ramban disagrees with Rashi about this. Okay, so that's part of the disagreement, whether the dreams had already been fulfilled or not. And I don't want to get too much into this, but what I really want to just note is that there is a whole nother approach over here, that the dreams had already been fulfilled the first time they bowed, and that was it. There was no need to keep this going. Okay, the last issue that he raises, and again, I don't want to get into the details of this, but I just want to note the basic issue. The Ramban is saying, and many of the classic commentators repeat this, that Yosef, the whole games with Binyamin was in order to test whether the brothers would treat Binyamin differently. Okay, now, that's one perspective. This guy, Yoel Binun, he has a long argument against this. Okay, and like I said, I'm not going to get into the details, but his basic argument is that that's not what Yosef was intending to do. He thinks that Yosef was trying to get Binyamin down so that he and Binyamin could create a little team and try to counter the brothers. So he really legitimately wanted Binyamin by himself, but he wasn't able to get his plan done. So my point is the following. According to the Ramban and the other classic commentators, Yosef is this brilliant puppet master who's manipulating the whole situation to his ends. This guy, Rabbi Binun, is arguing that it's the other way, that Yosef's plot was also foiled, right? Just like the brothers' plot was foiled, and just like all sorts, everybody's plan is foiled in this story, Yosef also had a plan. He wanted to get Binyamin by himself, and then he could reconnect with his full brother, right? And he could try to create a team against his half-brothers, but it didn't work. It failed. Yosef's plan also failed. Okay, and we'll see exactly what his plan was later. But the point is, according to Yoel Binun's approach, and again, we'll see some of the details later, it's not that Yosef is some great master strategist. It's the other way, that everyone's plans are failing except for God. Okay, so the only ones whose plans are going to end up, happening over here are God's, which again proves his original point that it's not our job to make sure that God's plans happen, right? Whatever he says is going to happen, and we don't need to work too hard or to do much to make sure that those happen. Okay, so those are some of the problems with the Ramban's view. Now, let me go to another answer over here. Okay, this is answer number two. And again, we're not at the contemporary approach yet. We're still in the medieval period. Okay, this comes from Tosfos. Okay, so the Ramban is, in the Sephardic world. Tosfos is in the Ashkenazi world. So what are they saying in the Ashkenazi world? So they have a very interesting approach. Rashi asks, I think in last week's parsha, Rashi asks, forget about why Yosef didn't contact his father. Why didn't God tell Yaakov that his son was alive? Right? Yaakov is a great prophet, right? He's in constant contact. He has all sorts of prophecies from God. God is always telling him little things. So why didn't he just tell him, instead of God watching him mourn for 22 years and be a broken man, why didn't God just tell him that his son is still alive? So Rashi answers a very interesting language. Rashi says that the brothers made a vow, right? They made a pact. It's like, right, any good criminal gang, you got to make a pact, right? Everybody has to agree not to talk to the authorities, because the first guy that folds, so he takes down the whole crew, right? So everyone has to vow not to rat anyone out. So the brothers made a vow on all of them, and again, there were 10 of them, so they had a minyan. They made a vow that nobody's allowed to reveal to Yaakov that Yosef's alive. and they included God in that vow. Okay, so the simple reading of Rashi is that the brothers like made some sort of vow which was binding on God, that he also couldn't tell Yaakov that Yosef was alive. Now, right, obviously that doesn't really make sense because you can't make a vow, you can't force God into a vow. So the way the commentator, or at least one explanation, is that what it just means is that God also agreed with that. In other words, it fit in with God's plans also, right? So not that the brothers made him vow, but he also, again, because of the dreams, right? He knew that, not just the dreams, he knew that the Jews need to go to Egypt. So God felt that Yaakov should not find out about this, even though it would cause him to suffer for 22 years. But it made sense for him not to know about it. So that's why he didn't tell them. But now Rashi adds a very interesting comment that Yitzchak, Yaakov's elderly father, did know that Yosef was alive. Because, right, I don't know, probably through prophecy, he did know that Yosef was alive. But he also didn't tell Yaakov, because he felt if God is not telling Yaakov, then I'm not going to tell him, right? In other words, Yitzchak doesn't want to violate, like if Hashem is choosing not to tell Yaakov, then Yitzchak also, he was going to follow Hashem's lead, okay? So basically, Yaakov is surrounded by people and things that know Yosef is alive, right? Obviously, his sons know he's alive, maybe not Binyamin, but the older 10. God knows that he's alive. Yitzchak knows that he's alive, and none of them are telling him. So Tosfos says something very, very interesting. He says that the brothers made a vow that nobody could tell Yaakov that Yosef is alive, and that included Yosef too. Okay, meaning they forced Yosef into this pact because they had a community vow, right? As a minyan, they were able to make a vow, and they forced Yosef and maybe Yitzchak also into this pact that he's not allowed to reveal to Yaakov that he's alive. So that's why Yosef couldn't contact his father all those years, because he was bound by the vow that his brothers had included him in, right? It's not, a vow is not exactly the word, but back in the day, communities would make like ordinances on the community, right? They would make like these decrees on the whole community, and everyone would have to follow them. So Yosef was bound by that decree not to tell his father that he's alive. So just like Yitzchak wasn't telling him, Yosef couldn't tell him. All right, very, very interesting solution to this issue. Now, the Rosh, who's one of the great halachic authorities, so he actually said that we learn a halacha from this, right? Let's say a guy is in a community and he's in shul and they make a new decree on the community, and he does not agree to abide by that decree. So the Rosh said that he has to speak up and he has to say, I don't agree to this, because if he just thinks it and he doesn't say it outright, then he's bound by the rules of the community. And the place that we learn that out from is Yosef, because since Yosef was there when they made the vow, and he didn't speak up and say, I don't agree to this, so he was included in that vow, even though he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to live like that. All right. So we see from here a practical halacha that if someone doesn't want to be in a communal ordinance, they need to speak up. Now, there's some debate about this, so I'm not saying it halachically. There's different sides on this, but that's just the second approach. Okay, so approach number 2 is the reason why Yosef didn't contact his father is because he too was included in this decree that the brothers had made, that no one could tell Yaakov that Yosef was alive, including Yosef. Okay, let's go to answer number 3. This also comes from Tosfos. And they say something which is the most practical of all. Okay, their answer, their third answer is that Yosef had no good time when he could contact his father. There was no good time because first he was a slave and then he was in prison. So he didn't want to contact his father and tell him I'm a slave or I'm in prison, because that would be even more painful. Right now his father would be worried about him, how bad things are going. So he didn't want to contact him then. Then he became the king, and he was worried that his father wouldn't believe that he's the king, right? In fact, when he actually does contact him, Yaakov has trouble believing it. So he was worried that his father wouldn't really believe that he was the king. And he was also worried that if he contacted his father, the brothers would get scared, hearing that he was the king, right? Imagine the brother you tried to kill shows up as the king of Egypt. they would get scared that he was going to kill them, and they would flee. They would go to all four corners of the earth. They would disappear. And then it would be a big, right? That would be a big disaster, because now his father would lose most of his sons. They'd be living God knows where. All right. So, okay, this is, I don't know, this is an imaginative approach. I don't know. You could obviously question some of this, but either way, I think it's an interesting suggestion that he was worried that the brothers would run from fear. So he didn't want to contact his father until he went through this whole thing, right? Once he went through the whole thing and he taught them a lesson, and then they obviously, they realized that he wasn't out to kill them or hurt them. So then they weren't going to run away. All right. So that's approach number 3. Okay. So those are the 3 classical approaches that I know of. Now let's go to the contemporary one. All right. And like I said, it's a very creative idea. And it's impressive really to be able to come up with such a fresh perspective on such a well-studied story. Okay. This is what Yoel bin Nun, this is what he suggested in his approach. He said the following, that, right, we make a mistake because we know the whole story, right? We know that Yosef was sold and the brothers put his coat in blood of an animal, and they told Yaakov that he had been killed. But Yosef didn't know that story. He didn't know that crucial piece of information, right? Yosef did not know that Yaakov thought he was dead all those years. So now let's go through this from the perspective of Yosef, not knowing that his father thinks he's dead. So what happens? Yosef gets sold into slavery, and it's, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, and he starts wondering, why is nobody looking for me? Where's my father? Right? Where is he? It's like, my father has all these slaves, right? He has all sorts of, he has a whole staff, he has people that he can send messengers to Esav. Where is he? Why is he not looking for me? Why is nobody coming, to search for me? So he begins to he's I don't know, perseverating, whatever it is, right? He's sort of obsessing over this issue, right? Why is nobody cared? And he comes to the following conclusion. He says, you know what? It must be that my father is in on this. My father is part of the plot to get rid of me. Because what's my evidence? Because my father sent me into the trap, right? Who sent him to the brothers? It was his father. And he's not looking for me. So it must be that the brothers somehow convinced him that I'm a bad guy, that I'm a bad son, I shouldn't be around. And he's part of their plan. He agrees with them that he doesn't want me to be part of the family. He wants me out of there. Again, he's not sure what he did. But as the years keep going on, so he just, he gets more and more convinced that there's something must have happened, right? Something, for some reason, his father abandoned him, right? This was not the first time in their family that a son had been abandoned. Abraham got rid of his son Yishmael. Yitzchak, had a sort of tough relationship with Esav, right? So each of the patriarchs got rid of one of their sons. So Yosef starts thinking to himself, you know what? I must be that son in Yaakov's life who's out, right? I'm the third, I'm the Yishmael, I'm the Esav of this generation that I'm out. All right. My father's against me. My father's on my brother's sides, right? Again, he has no idea that his father thinks he's dead. He thinks that his father knows what happened. His father knows that the brothers tried to kill him and then sold him into slavery. And his father's totally on board. And his father wants him out, and that's it. So Yosef decides, you know what? If that's the case, then I need to build my own life. All right, that's it. I'm out of the family for whatever the reason is, right? It's a mystery, but I need to build my own life over here. So he starts building his own life, right? He starts to rise in Egypt. And if you look at the names he gives his sons, right? Menashe and Ephraim. The names that he gives them are that Menashe is that I was left in this foreign country, and Ephraim is that I'm growing in this country. In other words, they're named for his new life, right? His old life was in the past. That was it. It was over, right? They're named for his new life. That's it. He's living his new life. So he didn't think to contact his father because he wasn't planning on going back. He wasn't planning on ever having a relationship with his father again. He thought it was over. So that's why he never contacted him for those 22 years. Then suddenly the brothers show up, and now his brothers walk into the room, and he's still, again, all right, all of the strange behavior now is because he still doesn't think that he doesn't know what's going on. He still thinks that the brothers sold him with Yaakov's consent, and he doesn't know what's going on. So he decides, you know what? He comes up with a plan. And he says, if I can get Binyamin alone in a room, if I can get these guys away and I can get Binyamin here, so then I can ask him what's going on. I can finally get clarity. What did the brothers, how did they get Yaakov on their side? So that's why he says you're spies, and he goes through this whole thing because he wants Binyamin to come down to Egypt, and then he'll get rid of the other brothers somehow, and he'll talk to Binyamin finally, openly, and he'll say to Binyamin, you're my brother. It's like you weren't part of this plot. What happened? Could you clarify why is our father against me? So that's his plan. He wants to get Binyamin there, and then he wants to finally clarify what's going on. But what happens is the plan goes haywire. Because the brothers come down, right? And the whole thing with Binyamin happens, and he puts the cup in his thing. And then Yehuda gets up. This is the beginning of next week's parsha. Yehuda gets up to give a speech. And he says, and in his speech, he says, Yehuda lets it slip that Yaakov thinks that Yosef is dead, right? He says, Va'amar tarof toraf or something, right? That in Yehuda's speech, he quotes that Yaakov said that Yosef was dead. And now suddenly the whole thing clicks for Yosef. Suddenly he realizes that Yaakov was lied to all these years. Suddenly at that speech, he understands the whole mystery is revealed. Because now he realizes that Yaakov never turned against him. It was a misunderstanding because Yaakov was lied to and thought he was dead. So once he realizes that, he immediately reveals himself and he says, bring down Yaakov. All right, so that's his suggestion over here. He acts like this is the best suggestion ever. It's an okay suggestion, but there are some problems. For example, Yosef was probably smart enough over all those years to figure out a way to get Binyamin, to talk to Binyamin. He could have sent Binyamin a letter, said to him what happened. So, okay, there's some problems with this approach also. But either way, it's a very clever approach. Right. And again, the key point of the approach is that Yosef all these years did not know that his father had been lied to. He thought that his father had turned against him because that was the only way he could make sense of it. And that's why he was sort of moving on. That's why he wasn't contacting them. That's why he was treating the brothers strangely. And then it was only when Yehuda let slip almost by accident that Yaakov had been lied to, that Yosef, was killed. So at that point, Yosef suddenly reveals himself because now he understands that his father did not turn against him at all. All right, so that's some of the approaches to answer this question. All right.